When I took the night shift at the Subterranean Records facility, 4 floors beneath the city, they gave me a manual with 7 strict protocols, but it was not the written rules that kept me awake during those 12-hour shifts. It was the realization that the previous worker had left a handwritten note taped under the desk that said, "Whatever you do, do not answer when you hear your own voice calling from the end of hallway B." I had been hired to monitor the temperature and security feeds of an underground document archive that had not seen daylight since 1984. The air down there was cold, thick with the scent of damp concrete and old paper. The facility stretched out into a labyrinth of long, identical corridors lit by hummed yellow, fluorescent tubes that flickered at irregular intervals. It was the definition of a space that felt like it was never meant for human presence. For the first 2 weeks, the job was painfully dull. I would sit in the small control room, watch the static heavy black and white monitors, and conduct my hourly rounds through the quiet halls. But on the 16th night, around 2:45 in the morning, the main monitor flickered. Camera 4, which faced the abandoned western wing, suddenly displayed a hallway I had never seen before. The floor was covered in stained green carpet, identical to the carpet in my childhood home. The walls were lined with doors, each marked with numbers that made no logical sense, and standing at the far end of that corridor, just barely within the edge of the camera frame, was a human figure standing completely motionless with its back turned to the lens. My heart hammered against my ribs. I checked the facility blueprints. According to the architecture diagrams, the western wing ended at a solid load-bearing wall. There was no green carpet, there were no numbered doors, and there certainly was no one else registered in the building. I pulled up the audio channel for camera 4. The speakers filled the control room with a low, wet rustling sound, like someone turning the pages of a book soaked in water. Then, the figure on the screen turned around slowly. I expected to see a trespasser or a squatter who had somehow bypassed the security gates. But as the face aligned with the low-resolution camera, my breath caught in my throat. The face on the monitor had no features. It was a flat, smooth expanse of pale skin, except for a single wide, dark slit where the mouth should have been. And as I stared at the screen, the creature raised its right arm and pointed directly at the camera lens. At that exact moment, the power in the control room died. The yellow fluorescent light snapped off, plunging the room into absolute darkness. The only light came from the emergency backup indicator on the wall, pulsing with a faint red glow. In the complete silence that followed, I heard a sound that chilled me to the marrow. From the hallway right outside my heavy steel door came the quiet, deliberate sound of footsteps on carpet, but the floor outside my door was bare concrete. I pressed my back against the wall, holding my breath, hoping whatever was out there would simply pass by. The footsteps stopped directly in front of the door. Seconds dragged into minutes. The air grew impossibly cold, cold enough that my breath billowed out in white clouds. Then came a knock. 3 slow, deliberate raps against the metal frame. I reached for the flashlight on my belt, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped it. I flicked the switch, cutting a thin beam of light through the dark. The door remained closed, but beneath the crack at the bottom of the frame, I saw something slide into the room. It was a piece of paper, a standard yellow notepad sheet, folded in half. With every instinct screaming at me to run, I crept forward and picked up the paper. Unfolding it, I recognized my own handwriting. It was a message written in dark ink, dated for tonight, at 3:15 in the morning. The message read, "Do not look at the monitors when the power comes back on, because it is standing right behind you in the reflection." I glanced at my watch. The hands clicked to 3:14. A sudden hum vibrated through the floorboards as the emergency generator kicked in. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed back to life, flickering violently before settling into a harsh glare. In front of me, the glass screens of the security monitors powered back on, reflecting the dimly lit control room behind me. I kept my eyes fixed on the blank wall ahead of me, terrified to look at the reflective glass of the screens. But as the monitors fully warmed up, the reflections grew clearer and clearer. In the black reflection of the center monitor, I saw the doorway behind me. The heavy steel door was now standing wide open, and in the center of the doorway stood a tall, elongated figure wearing the exact same clothes I was wearing tonight. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It just stood there, staring at the back of my head. My mind raced to comprehend what I was looking at. Was it a mirror? Was it a hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation and isolation? But then the figure in the reflection did something that sent a surge of pure terror through my veins. It smiled, a wide, unnatural tear across its pale face that stretched far past human proportions, revealing rows of small, needle-sharp teeth. And yet, when I looked at my own physical hands, I was not smiling. I was trembling, teeth chattering from the freezing air that had overtaken the room. The figure in the monitor was moving independently of me. Slowly, the creature in the reflection took a step forward into the room. I felt the air pressure change behind me, a heavy, suffocating weight pressing against my back. I knew that, if I turned around, whatever force was keeping me alive would break. I remembered the second rule written on the note under the desk. If you encounter an echo of yourself, do not make eye contact with its reflection. Address it as if it belongs here. I forced my vocal cords to work, my voice barely a whisper in the silent room. I asked what key was needed for the lower vault. The moment the words left my lips, the heavy pressure behind me vanished. The freezing cold receded, replaced by the warm, stagnant air of the bunker. I dared to look at the monitor reflection again. The doorway was closed. The figure was gone. On the control desk, the intercom speaker crackled to life with a burst of static. A voice came through the small metal grate. It was my voice, clear and unmistakable, speaking with calm, calculated precision. It said that the key is already in your pocket, and you brought it down here yourself. I reached slowly into my jacket pocket. My fingers brushed against something cold and metal that had not been there when I started my shift. I pulled it out. It was a heavy brass key stamped with a single word, VOID. The facility logs never mentioned a void section. None of the floor plans, maintenance reports, or employee handbooks contained any reference to it. But as I held the key in my palm, a low, rhythmic thumping sound began to reverberate through the concrete floor beneath my boots. It was coming from the end of hallway B, where the restricted storage doors were located. I knew I should have abandoned my post right then and there. I should have climbed the stairs, forced open the emergency exit, and never looked back. But as anyone who has ever worked in absolute isolation knows, terror is eventually overridden by a morbid, dangerous curiosity. I picked up my heavy flashlight and stepped out of the control room. The corridor stretched out before me, a long tunnel of damp concrete and flickering lights. Every step I took echoed against the walls, creating the eerie illusion that someone was walking a few paces behind me, matching my rhythm. Every time I paused, the echo took half a second longer to stop. When I reached the end of hallway B, I found a door that had never been there during my previous rounds. It was made of thick, rusted iron, completely unpainted, with a keyhole that matched the brass key in my hand. Taped to the center of the iron door was another note in my handwriting. It said, "You have already opened this door 4 times this week. Every time you open it, you forget what you saw inside, and you write these notes to warn yourself for the next night. Look at your left arm." My heart stopped. I slowly pulled up the sleeve of my jacket. Scratched into the skin of my forearm were 4 distinct tally marks, scabbed over and red, and right beside them was a fresh, bleeding line that had just begun to form. My breath caught in my chest. The key in my hand suddenly felt burning hot. I looked back down the long, empty hallway toward the control room. The fluorescent lights were shutting off one by one, starting from the far end, plunging the corridor into darkness, coming closer and closer to where I stood. The shadows were advancing rapidly, swallowing the doors, the pipes, the walls. I had 2 choices. I could let the encroaching darkness overtake me in the hallway, or I could unlock the iron door and step into whatever was waiting inside the void. With trembling hands, I inserted the brass key into the lock. The mechanism turned with a heavy, metallic clunk that resonated through my bones. The iron door slowly swung inward, revealing a pitch-black abyss that seemed to swallow the light from my flashlight. From deep within that darkness, a voice whispered my name. Not in my voice this time, but in the voice of someone I hadn't heard in 15 years. It said that I had finally remembered where I left the rest of us. I stepped over the threshold into the dark, and as the iron door slammed shut behind me, the last thing I saw, in the reflection of the smooth, black walls, was hundreds of identical tally marks covering every single inch of the stone. I realized then that this was not my first week on the job. It had been decades, and the person listening to this right now is about to start their very first night shift. When you arrive at the control desk tonight, check under the blotter. The note is waiting for you, written in your own hand. Do not open the 5th door unless you are ready to remember who you used to be, because once the void takes your reflection, it never gives it back. The lights in the hallway will flicker 3 times. When they do, they fail completely. Do not run for the stairs. The stairs are no longer there. Just sit at the desk. Keep your eyes fixed on the blank screens and wait for the sound of carpeted footsteps to reach your door. And whatever you do, when you hear your voice asking to be let in, do not look at the key in your hand, because by then, the tallies on your arm will already be full. Every night, the facility resets, the tapes rewind, the logs clear, and the heavy iron door locks itself from the outside. You will wake up at your desk at 10 p.m. with a hot mug of coffee and a fresh set of security keys. Believing it is your very first day on the job, you will feel a strange sense of familiarity as you walk down the cold concrete halls. You will think it is just standard fatigue. You will read the rules pinned to the bulletin board and smile at how ridiculous they sound. Rules about not answering the intercom. Rules about ignoring the sound of wet pages turning in empty rooms. Rules about the green carpet hallway that exists only on camera 4. You will sit down, take a sip of your coffee, and glance at the monitor, and at precisely 2:45 in the morning, camera 4 will flicker. You will see the figure standing at the end of the green corridor with its back turned to you. You will feel the sudden drop in temperature, and you will reach into your jacket pocket, searching for the flashlight you always carry. Instead, your fingers will touch a heavy brass key with a single word etched into the cold metal. That is when you will notice the fresh scab forming on your left arm, and you will realize that you are not the person monitoring the void. You are the reason the door has to stay locked.